Good evening and welcome, everybody. The third time I see you today on Aquarius Rising Africa. And what a pleasure, because we are talking about unmasking the fallen giants, secret societies, end time prophecies, and really just an open dialogue with the amazing Gary Wayne. So he's an author, researcher, calls himself a Christian contrarian, which I love because it really is exploring things to the nth degree. So, fantastic guest to have on. And I think I'm just going to bring Gary on without any further ado. Good evening, Gary. How are you? Wonderful to have you back.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation again tonight. And hopefully, people like the last couple of shows that we did together. And maybe we can break some new ground on some things.
Uh, I'm definitely looking forward to that because you know I'm going to ask you about those sirens again, right? But we'll first warm up with other things. But anyway, guys, but just for the benefit of those, and I'm not sure how many people on this platform actually don't know your work, but maybe you can just share with us, just for those who don't, um, that are new to your work, basically, what would you mean when we talk about the fallen and how they connect with the giants, the fallen angels
Yeah,
and the giants of Genesis 6? So maybe you could just open up for us with that.
sure. That's always a good place to start. And for the record, fallen angels as a term doesn't fall into the English lexicon as it fits into the translation into English for the Bible. So, and what do I mean by that? You can't look up in English a term for fallen ones. So, a lot of people want to know how that comes out, and if you're going to use that sort of terminology, shouldn't you be able to back that up? I mean, I guess the way I would look at it is this: yes, A, you can back it up, but B, sort of the notion that angels rebel and that they fall away from God would be kind of how you would interpret that, whether it sort of comes there biblically or not. It's kind of like the word rapture, which is an Italian word, but used in Christian end time prophecy, but the word doesn't show up in the Bible, but the word rapture is rooted in a Greek word, harpazo, that is. So it's kind of like that, sort of similar. But we do have something that I think is a direct link to the term, which really sort of helps us with understanding that this whole concept of the question that you just asked. So in Isaiah 14, you have Satan, who's the chief of the angels, the leader of the rebellious angels. He falls from heaven. That word in Hebrew is nephal. And
Right.
when you put the I am male plural on it, it becomes Nephilim versus Nephilim. So NAPH versus NEPH. Nephilim with the E is the giant term. I am is the male plural. So that would be fallen one, as it would represent Satan as he fell from the earth as one of the angels. But in the plural, it would be Nephilim. So Nephal in the singular, Nephilim in the plural, and that's fallen ones. So when you get the term Gibborim used for mighty ones to describe giants, and that's a very good parallel word and definition, where it says in Genesis 6:4 that the giants or the Nephilim were mighty ones. That's Gibor, and the male plural is Im, so fallen ones.
Mm.
So when you have like seraphim, that means like serpent-faced ones. And it's used in that sort of way. So we understand the angels that followed Satan also as fallen ones now in the plural. So
Right.
Nephal and Nephilim is the source word for the word Nephilim for giant. And Nephilim derives out of the fallen ones. So a lot of people call the giants the fallen ones, even though you don't get that in its definition. You get tyrant, you get bully, you get a tribe of giants, and you get giants. But it carries some of the meaning from the source word. not all of it, because it's a separate, distinct word. And so these are demigods as they're understood. So, and what's so beautiful about that, if you can just look at the language sort of aspect of it, is that not only are the giants the offspring of the fallen angels, the sons of God, that's recorded in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, but their meaning and their word and their title is an extension from them as well, because they're the ones given the divine right to rule on
Right.
this earth from the gods. And so when we look at Nephil and Nephilim, these are the giants. This is the Hebrew word for giants that's used in a lot of the English translations, like the King James Version Bible. Other ones will just transfer that word literally, as in some of the more modern translations, to be Nephilim. And that means the giant ones, as you sort of carry that forward.
Right.
And so
Right.
they were
Right.
created in all cultures all around the earth. And we get accountings of that all around the earth. And Genesis 6, 1 through 4 is the biblical accounting of these giants created in ancient history.
So, you know me, I'm always going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons just a little bit.
Sure.
So, what evidence? And usually people are asking me for evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to say to you, what evidence most convinces you, right, that these were just like moral parables, if you will,
Yeah.
right? But literal beings that influenced early
Sure.
civilization.
Yeah, and a lot of people will come at that from a more of a polytheist perspective because of
Right,
how history was recorded in polytheist cultures around the world in ancient times, that they would put it into myths and legends. And there was a fellow by the name of Humor in Greek history, who
right,
humorism is noted for, where they were trying to detect and use methodologies to interpret those myths to decipher what was the historical aspect from the fictional narrative aspect, just to hold that information. So they had an art or a style or a literary style used to do that, where you would have in modern times, that might be, or I guess these ones would be a little older, but the fairy tale would have that same principle in it, that it's carrying that history, but there's a narrative there, or mythopoetic, like Lewis or MacDonald or Tolkien would use. It's that same kind of style that comes down through
right,
history. And each of those cultures, though, would have be taught different things to understand what was the history, what was the fable. And what was the interesting story? What were the actual facts? But what is
right,
interesting is that in all cultures all around the world, they didn't pick a different allegory for how the giants are created. They are all done in the same way, from gods or fallen angels with human males or human females. It's identical in the same way. And that in itself is a testimony that that's not an allegory. Because if you have all of
right,
these disparate cultures all around the world that would have a learning curve that would be different, and supposedly different religions, I don't buy into all of that sort of brainwashing that secularism teaches us in schools. But you would have different allegories in terms of how the giants are recorded. And just the fact that they're recorded in all cultures all around the world, and probably including Antarctica, but we
amen,
don't know what we might find there. But in all cultures and on all continents that we have people civilizing on with a civilization, so to speak, we get the same story, and they're identical. So in Greek mythology, the best example for that is the Atlantean one, because everybody's familiar with Atlantis because of the mythos that it carries forward, right? And in that, you have Poseidon, who is going to take a human female named Clyto, produce 10 demigod kings, Atlas being the most famous, that ruled in Atlantis proper, to rule over the 10 empires of Atlantis en route to uh, global domination, which was their agenda. They failed, according to the accounts in Timaeus and Critias by Plato, but they were created in the same way, did the same things, and were the same kinds of giants that were recorded in the Bible or in Sumeria or anywhere else in the
Right.
world. So it is a
Right.
mathematical impossibility as you look at the permutations and the odds of that being the case. And in the same general period, that are all connected to a flood story. Those things just don't happen. That common legacy has been preserved, and it was kept in manners and styles that knowledge would not be lost because it was important for the future generations to know and to learn from.
Absolutely. But if we look at, I would agree that if we talk about the fallen ones, it
Yes.
would kind of imply also on another level that really it was the separation of the or the rebellion of certain forces, angelic forces, right?
Yep.
Because at that stage, I don't believe they were physical at all, and then fell down, right? So descended into the lower realm, which is obviously then the physical body, right? So definitely taken on that physical shape of whatever it was that the giants were. So, but
And
then
and
at some point,
I was just going to say, though, and the use of the term fallen one would be from a biases of a Christian or monotheist biases, that they
right?
fell or they rebelled. From a polytheist lens, that's not the case. They didn't fall. They are the gods who run everything. And so, again, we want to understand the different lenses that the story is told through. But the fallen one aspect is a monotheist perspective versus the polytheist perspective.
But even if we look at the polytheist perspective, when
Yep.
they think they are gods that run everything, that
Yep.
is a fallen mindset, actually. And it's a very deluded mindset, actually. If we think about it, that's somewhere they fell, somewhere that's a fallen mindset. Would you not agree with that? They're
Well, I
thinking
would.
rubbish.
I would, but I have a biases. I'm a monotheist, so what they would say is that they created everything, and amongst the gods, there was one that fell and went rogue, and that would be the God of the Bible.
I mean, yes, I can see that too. I can. I can see both perspectives. I
Yep.
truly can. And I can see why they would think that, but I can
Yep.
also come from the monotheist
Yep.
perspective, and I can understand why that is that way as well. But let's talk from your perspective for a minute,
Yep.
okay?
Sure.
And
Yep.
then that's going to now take me onto my question that I have
Yep.
around the
Yep.
sirens,
Hmm.
okay? Because in my reading and in my understanding, because although everyone here knows I was not brought up religious at all, but with definitely the Christian perspective, right? That was what I was surrounded with in schools and stuff like that. So I know, obviously the basics of that, but not. I've never studied it. I've never gone into the theology and stuff like that. So I do understand quite a bit of that. But if we're looking at the sirens, right? To
Hmm.
me, right now, I mean, in the beginning, yes, they might have been and were, right, the daughters of men, so
Hmm.
physical beings. right?
Yes.
That were then seduced by the fallen ones.
Yep.
So, but then, of course, at some point they die, they lose their bodies. But that energy, so the energy, it's like, to me, it's the energetic expression of the wounded feminine, because that, think about what that is. I mean, in my opinion, that was probably, on a physical level, the greatest act of narcissism ever. And in my opinion, that is probably where the original lie sits. Because if you can imagine those dodgy angels just before they came down, sitting there like eyeing out the human woman, going, "Ooh, look at that one, I like that one," and knowing everything about them. So
Yep.
already having created this and concocted this plan to seduce the women. And I mean, I can imagine they came down, descended, and these women must have been googly eyed at these gorgeous looking
Yeah.
males, right?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
looking like demigods, speaking with such intelligence and wisdom and authority, and saying, "Well, I'm a chosen one, and God has chosen you to learn astrology. God has chosen you to learn numerology." Now, any person, and I speak specifically to women, who's been hoodwinked by a narcissist knows what a smooth talker they can be. So every woman who's been seduced by narcissism understands what that's about.
Yeah.
So perhaps they went in not knowing, through spell work. I mean, these guys were full on, had all the magical spells and whatever God created, they had. It was at their fingertips, literally using that. And then, Gary, if we look at what you were saying earlier on as well about, I think you said in the Greek scriptures or the Greek text, it actually shows the giant or these women being tied upside down, hanging there with sperm being put into their vaginas, to, that to me sounds like what? Satanic ritual abuse.
Yeah.
So all of that right over there was satanic ritual abuse from the original fallen angels, who are now, hello, the 1% elite that are still ruling this planet, still doing the same old shit, excuse my, the same old, just much more advanced. So the women got the blame for seducing the fallen angels. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's that
and
wound.
yeah. So, and it was
Carry
actually not the women who seduced the fallen angels or the gods. It's the other way around because, as what you said, their great knowledge, their great beauty, their capabilities, and so the procreators are the seducers here, and whether it's male or female, in terms of how those incursions happen, they're the victims, and they're going to pay that sort of
right.
consequences. And it's kind of akin, even to this day, if somebody has a spirit that comes to them, you need to test the spirits because they're seducing spirits, right? They're trying to
Right.
entice you into sin. And that would be the same sort of MO that was there. So, from a blame perspective, I would not blame the women, or and in some cases the men, as we get accounts in the prehistory on this, for what happened. But they are not a superior being like who they're mating
Mhm.
with. And so in the Kebra Nagast, all of these first mothers died in childbirth because the babies were so
Right.
large, and they did some sort of cesarean ritual in favor of the baby demigods, and the women
Right.
were killed.
Discarded.
Yeah, so whether or not that was in every case, that's, we don't get many accounts of the actual childbirth and what happens to the women. And then they raise the women to, in various different ways. In some cultures and aspects in the Middle East, we have them raised to being to mother goddess status. In other traditions, they're sort of reduced to mermaid status. But they are looked upon in the mermaid status as being, accursed almost, even though they're beautiful. And they're um, leading and doing horrible things to humankind, right? For the most part, is anytime you get involved with a mermaid, it just leads to, it sounds good at the beginning, but then it leads to not good things. So it's interesting how history has either tried to fill in the gap as to what happened to these beings, the women that we're talking about at this point, and created different sort of avenues for that. But typically, we don't get a direct line to these beings as being sirens, except in the book of Enoch. The other ones are you take them back to the gods, but a different path to sort of get there. And so it's kind of an obscure sort of connection that you're trying to sort through the reality of the sirens and what does that really mean. But yet we have sirens, mermaids, queen of heaven, demigod, queen of heavens versus full-fledged fallen angel, queen of heavens, that come down in the cultures all around the world as well. So it's a constant. So there's something there on both sides of that coin that are distinct, but I think the human demigod aspect of it would be more of a reflection of the god or fallen angel side as they receive authority within that position, or the accursed curse that comes with it, depending on how you follow that chain through history.
I think the curse that comes with it is the fact that the lie about these women
Yep.
has never been rectified. So what happens then is that it's expressions of the wounded feminine. Now, we can never ever deny that energy, I mean, we are created from energy, sound, frequency, and vibration. And energy, with negative energy, will make you sick, positive energy heals you. It's that simple. So, when this incessant lie has been passed down by the elites, think about this, because women mother. Think about how, in many cultures, the female energy, the women, are so disrespected. They are treated like they are nothing. And yet, women are the creators of life. Women grow life within them. If you think about a woman and what she's able to achieve in her body, it's a miracle, right? So, what I'm saying is that it's almost like that lie has been the thing that has kept humanity, society blind to the truth about what really happened. That the elites, like we're exposing now, were really the fallen ones that narcissistically raped, abused, seduced, coerced, manipulated the females of the time, who are still, after millennia, being blamed. So that then would energetically mean that collective female pain body, right, that's still very active in society, in the energy realms, right? Okay. So if you think about that, that would reflect, that would be a wounded expression in each and every one of us because it's never been healed ancestrally, energetically, or in the family. Everyone
Yeah.
judges the sirens and the Jezebels and the this and the that because, in my opinion, we've not healed that wound within ourselves. And until such time that we see the truth, that wound is going to exist in this society as well as in each and every one of us as well.
Yeah,
What do you say, Gary?
well, and I think that is as you say, it's something that was playing out in prehistory and all throughout our history, and we see that, even to this day. I think there's a bit of a departure that happens in the same prehistory where you have a patriarchal system set up through the elites, which is the males, obviously, and it wasn't always that case from a God perspective. That in the older you go back, you learn that the female goddess was not just a fertility goddess, but a war goddess, and generally considered at the top of the pantheon. And that even happens with inside the royal worship, that they recognize the queen as in the hive belief system, right? With the drones being just lower, that's part of their model. But it's that physical manifestation on earth that the patriarchal system has sort of move the matriarchal aspect downwards and push themselves upwards from a patriarchal perspective. So I think that affects everything that we have in terms of the way we look at things. And I think that plays out in a lot of cases the way that you say. I certainly wouldn't carry it to the extent of the toxic male aspect that has hit our generation. Um, but that is a reaction to that to a certain degree. So I don't think just being male is toxic. That's my point with that. But you can see how that plays out, and there's a back and forth. I would also suggest that if we're going into the end times, that we're going to see a return, at least to a certain level, of the position of the female goddess in the universal religion that's coming. So whether that's a full restoration or not, I don't know. I'm not a prophet, but I know when that religion comes full back about again, is probably going to have a closer akin to what it was originally in prehistory to what we see in its various forms around the world today. But yeah, that's a notion, and even within monotheism, you have that dominant matriarchal aspect and a suppression of the female. So
Right.
it's not just one particular sort of religion, it's a worldwide phenomena. And so I think where it was perpetuated, though, just to finish the point, is from the giants, both before and after the flood, who became more narcissistic uh, potentates and dictators, and they decided to raise their gender to that higher sort of level where it wasn't that way originally.
Right. I fully agree with that. And I think, if we look at Satanism or the fallen ones, everything about them is physical. So it's about raising the female goddess to whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily what it is. And that's what I'm saying. Because they've had the ability, if we look at any SRA, right, the first thing they do is they disconnect the child from its mother. They will generally create a huge disconnect from the mother. The mother represents, or the mother is the physical manifestation of emotional or feminine energy. So when we think energy, mother equals feminine. Now, the first thing they do is disconnect the emotional energy, which creates a huge mistrust. Because when we are discerning and we are able to discern, it's your emotions that need to be in tune. It's your emotions that have to be aligned, that give you that signal of yes, go, or no, stop, right? It's your intuition. So your emotion has to be intact and connected. And that's the first thing they disconnect. So I would say, rather than about raising the physical feminine goddess, which they all want to do. And Beyonce and Meghan Markle and all these people just can't get enough dressing up and being the queens and the goddesses and the whatever it is. I mean, they do look beautiful to the eye, let's admit. These women are beautiful. But I would say it's about reclaiming that emotional connection, that absolute feeling, that connected state to God, feeling, emotion, allowing, trusting, believing, joy, all these things that we get so lost in a patriarchal society. In the patriarchal society, it's go, 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 do, head, head, head. If we just think of the education, right? It's all about how many degrees you have and at Oxford and blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of like taking it back to the heart and understanding if we heal our emotional wounds, that's when the planet starts healing, because they've taken away the feminine aspect
Yeah,
in
and
this
so
patriarchal society.
yeah, and in the polytheist version, that will bring the balance back in, and then you can have that um, convergence or vibration into a God level or a higher state of consciousness. So that's why one of the reasons why I think that we're going to have in the belief system from polytheism a restoration of that. From a monotheist perspective, we should not get too lost in physical world constructs. Um, Angels and spirit beings in
Exactly.
heaven, yeah, they don't have a gender. That's the construct of the physical world, where
Exactly.
things are immortal, are not immortal, they're mortal. So when fallen angels take a form, which they have the ability to do, they create their own oiketeria, a soul and a body for their spirit that comes from heaven, from God. They can choose. They can choose what they want to look like, and they can choose their gender. But that's a physical world construct. And so we get too
Mm,
caught up
exactly.
in trying to emulate what happens in heaven, but done through a physical construct, which isn't applicable.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly where we lose sight of what's real. Because if we look at the Luciferians, that's what's so important to them. How much
Yeah.
gold do you have? How beautiful is your temple and your pyramid or whatever it is, right? And how beautiful are your clothes and
Yeah, and
how beautiful is your face?
that's what they can offer is physical world constructs because they can't offer that in the other dimension of heaven. They can only do that in the worlds that they control. So they don't refer to the spirit often. It's like the spirit doesn't exist in polytheism. They refer to the soul, and they've conflated soul and spirit as the same. Well, the spirit comes from heaven, but the soul and the body is of the physical world. And so what they're offering is a form of reward on all aspects, including immortality and
Exactly.
godhood within the physical world, but not in the spiritual world. So everything is, again, we need to understand the constructs that the deceptions are um, manifested in and the parameters
Correct.
that they have to stay in to make those manifestations.
It's so true. It's so true. And this is why I always say it's so important for us to do our shadow work or our healing work, whatever whatever we are all here to do whatever healing we need to. And healing doesn't mean we're broken. It just
Yeah.
means we've got to get back into balance. We're just out of
Yeah.
balance. We've got a wrong idea about something, and
Yeah.
that's creating.
And where this sort of intersects is that we're all here. And the reason for us being here is to figure out why we're here and then to make choices. Um,
Exactly.
and so the more you learn, the more you have a better ability to make your choice and then be comfortable in your choice. And that we have to understand that not making a choice is still a choice. A lot of people think you
Exactly.
can abstain, but you cannot. And so you
I
should.
would absolutely.
Yeah. So we need to understand why we believe what we believe. It doesn't mean that once we start moving in that direction, you are perfect, because we're not. Um, but
No.
at least you will be moving in the direction of whatever spiritual path that you've chosen. And I would try encourage people to consider the monotheist version, but I want them to know why they believe what they believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. I really do. Gary, the word prophecy to some people can sound quite ominous,
Yeah.
yet there are many people that want hope, right? So, how do you personally, where we're at right now, kind of see this whole redemption process playing itself out, or the human awakening, right? Or the divine intervention? How do you
Yeah.
see it playing out?
Well, it's always an interesting topic for sure, and I'll lay the premise down first of all is whether or not it is prophecy that comes from the Bible, whether it comes from the Vedas, whether it comes from New Age, whether it comes from any other religion around the world. Understand that most religions, because there's basically only two, there's just branches of each, um, have prophecy that's part of that religion. And just as we have the same prehistory, they talk about the same period in the end time. They're nuanced to a certain degree in terms of some of how some of the events will play out and the outcome, but it's talking about that same destruction by fire that starts a new
Right,
age or begins the millennium and then on to eternity. So they're a little bit nuanced, but there is this destiny that is, designed to be played out that will be an ordained time, um, even though the destiny aspect is trying to bring it about beforehand continually. But there is a specific, so it's more fate than destiny, even though destiny may make those choices to get there. So I know that sounds a bit complicated. So prophecy can be quite
mm,
obscure for people. And it doesn't matter, again, whether it's polytheist or it is monotheist, and particularly within Christianity and particularly within North America, the obscurity of prophecy has gone to a whole level of what you might likely can only interpret as how it could get that way is a planned deception, so to speak. So, because it's so muddled and there's so many different views, and from a Christian perspective, there are so many interpretive ways of doing prophecy. None of them are the same. None of them have the same sequence. None of them have exactly the same timing for certain events and how that outcome comes about. But they're all biblically based, which again just throws things on the idea of prophecy that takes away from its credibility. It is like if the
right,
Bible is that powerful, if the Bible is from God, why do you have to be a polytheist adept using polytheist hermeneutics to understand it? And nobody asks
yeah,
it in those types of questions, but that's for me trying to make it sort of clear to people what's going on here and maybe give them a little bit of a head shock. So from what I look as prophecy is, I came at it from a different perspective. Did I read about it and fall into some of the dispensationalisms and timing for rapture and stuff like that in the beginning? Absolutely. But as I dug deeper from I wanted to have everything verified. I don't want to accept what somebody says, which is all of the
right.
prophecy approaches that most people utilize. I want to verify things for myself. I found there was too many contradictions, and I don't think the Bible ought to have contradictions. So I'm going, well, okay, if that's an issue, and now I'm looking at how you interpret these passages and you add things in there that aren't there, and then you do it over and over and over to continue to make a timeline or a doctrine that you're trying to do over and over and over and changing more passages. That's not right. The Bible is telling us that the world is going to be inherited by the meek. Prophecy would not be done and given to us in a way where only the elite could understand it if they went through the degrees of polytheism to understand it. That makes no
Right.
sense to me. It should be there for
Right.
all of us. So I think we do get that certainty, and I think that's why all of these other approaches have arisen to change the outcome, to confuse Christians, and to
Right.
discredit our side of the prophecy. So when I look at
Right.
prophecy, I approach it in a very simple way. I have a literal approach that what it says is what it means, and if there is allegory there, and there is a little bit of allegory. It's like when you have weeks of years. Well, that's an allegory, right? So, I mean, there's 7 days in a week, and days and years can be used for some prophetic allegory, but it's defined in the Bible. You don't have to go to the wisdom of the world to get that definition. It's within the Bible. So, if you want to understand who Babylon is, you just need to read more in the Bible and you're going to get all of the topology that you need. And if people aren't familiar with that term in prophecy, it is a really good way of understanding events and organizations involved in the end time by using a study that they call of the verses of the same type. You would do that in archaeology of writings. You would do that of symbols. It's topology. It's the study of things that are of a similar type. So you can get multiple passages that use the same words to identify those things. So when you're trying to get
Right.
support, you should have topology for it. And the Bible provides that. But you have to have a proper starting point. And when I look at whether it's preterism or dispensationalism, which has a heavy bias to pre-trib rapture, post-millennialism, I won't go through. The newer one is little seasonism, so to speak, using the isms. They have a preconceived conclusion that they're trying to justify, and they don't have a
Right.
proper starting point. So Jesus made it pretty simple for us if we wanted to listen to him. He's the Word of God and the Spirit of prophecy, as he's described in the New Testament. And so he gave us a template. So in Matthew 24, he gives us a template right up to the rapture of the church. We don't get the Armageddon details there, just the rapture of the elect. And we know it's
Right.
in chronological order, and we know why he's presenting us, because the disciples asked him to give us the signs of the end time and his coming and his return, right? So we know the context, and he outlines a certain generation where all of these things are going to be fulfilled, and uses the Greek word tota for for then or the when on these sequences of events. So we get an order, and then he tells us at the time of the abomination in Matthew 24:15-20 to go read all about Daniel, who wrote about the abomination in this time period, to get more details to put on before the abomination and after the abomination. You go to Daniel 2, you go to Daniel 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12. And all of a sudden, you have all of these other details that I would say hold off before you overlay that onto Matthew 24, as we're kind of instructed to do. Go to Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21. Take the additional details not listed in the Matthew 24 template, put that on first, then overlay Daniel, then go to Revelation, which is the testimony of Jesus given to the angel to show John. So it cannot contradict Jesus. And now you're having ability to overlay Revelation onto that
yeah,
template. And what you do is, and I won't go into too much more detail and I'll let you back in here, but Revelation 1 to 5, just sort of keep that separate. It's the letters to the churches, but for the last 7 years, or around the start of the last 7 years, because they can go either way, where the first seal might open just before the start of the last seven, that's recorded in Daniel 9:27, or just afterwards, but go from Revelation 6 to Revelation 14:6. And you overlay that from Matthew 24, 24:9 to 20. That's the first 3.5 years of events. After that, you go Revelation 14, and in Revelation 14:6 forward to the end of that chapter is the major events of the last 3.5 years in chronological order. So you overlay those events on the other half of the abomination. Then you get the details of that last 3.5 years in Revelation 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and then you're on to the millennium. So then you're going to start overlaying other New Testament prophecies onto that template, and then you're ready to overlay anything in the Old Testament. But I would start with Isaiah and Jeremiah, because you have to understand Second Exodus, and when that happens in the last 3.5 years, so that everything fits. So start there in Zechariah, Isaiah, and Jeremiah to look at the second Exodus passages and overlay that first, and then whichever ones you want to overlay, they'll just fit, because you have all the topology of the same events with the same types of words in the same timing that are expressed. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Once you get that template first set down, just start adding more pieces in.
That's super interesting what you're saying there, because it's exactly what you...
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's simple, right?
Yes, when you have the template, it's like what you're saying, but it's to figure out that template. That takes a bit of a genius mind, right? So it's almost like it's like encrypted. Would you have to read it like initially, almost like encrypted, right?
Well,
to understand how to actually...
It's not encrypted, although it seems like that, like it is. It's not. It's the brainwashing and the preparation not to accept what Jesus said. And then in all of these other approaches, what they do is they try and rewrite what Jesus said and change the meanings of the words. And he's saying, well, he's not, just because he's Alpha Omega doesn't mean he was talking to the church in those passages. The church wasn't created yet, but it is in Matthew 16. It is before that. And these are the disciples that are going to create the church. I mean, it's absolute nonsense that these approaches will utilize, but people will say, yeah, because I want to believe it happens this way, as opposed to what did Jesus say? And so my basic rule and thumb is this: the simplicity where the thought came from is why would I put what Jesus said around what any other prophet said? Why wouldn't I put what all the other prophets said around what Jesus said? Because all of that comes from the Word of God. And then people will come out and say, and make it unclear and say, well, the Holy Spirit told me that it would happen this way. And my comment back to those people is, hey, you should probably test the spirits, because the Holy Spirit would never be in contradiction with the Word of God. So it just won't happen.
Yeah, I laugh at that because it's so true what you're saying there, but I won't expand on that. But I have a question for you. Just when you're talking about the templates, and how to once you have the template, it's kind of like you've got to understand how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Makes a lot of sense to me. What then do you say to the missing books of the Bible? There's a lot of controversy around the missing books of the Bible,
Yeah.
and different versions of the Bible, right?
Hmm.
Because we're hearing different versions of the Bible. We're hearing King James, who was
Hmm.
literally a cannibal and a Satanist, who wrote the King James version, and it's copyrighted by the royal family, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So what do we
And
say to that?
edited
And
and
what is
edited
the
by Francis Bacon, a
yeah,
Rosicrucian. So
exactly right. So I
yeah,
mean, seriously, you know, when I as someone who is not a religious person,
yeah,
when I see that, I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me! Come on,
yeah,
that can't be the way. I get there's a lot of truth, but they're going to pepper that with a lot of nonsense as well. So I'd
yeah.
love your take on that.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is there's no perfect English translation. So
Hmm.
we want to be aware of that. And we shouldn't raise any of those translations done by humans and by the elite to be an idol status, right? Um, I think all of the translations have some issues, but I don't think it changes significantly what the Bible is teaching. But you should understand that some of the translations are a little bit different. Some of the ones that use more newer manuscripts in the New Testament, for example, um, are using manuscripts that are missing passages that the KJV will use. But most of those translations will give you a footnote and give you that verse at the bottom of the page, or put it in brackets and say, and it'll be a note saying from other manuscripts has this passage in there. So we get the certainty from the original language of the Hebrew in the Old Testament as it was written down and passed down, and then in the Greek in the New Testament. And that's what I try and do. So I don't defend errors of translation in the KJV or in any other one, but what I would recommend is that if you want to, is have two or three or four different translations and compare important passages to see how they're translated. Or in the age of technology, just Google that verse, whether or not you want Genesis 6:1 as an example, or 6:4, or Deuteronomy 32:8, Psalms 82. I'm picking some controversial ones that people may want to look at. And if you just pick one verse, and Google it under Bible Hub, it will give you like 30 or 40 different English translations, and you can look at how it's translated and see the nuances to what they changed it, or the significant difference, and then look for the trend. Um, so when I learned that, then I knew I had to learn the original Greek and Hebrew word, just because I'm a contrarian. I wanted to know and make up my own decision, because I didn't think the word unicorn should be in the KJV Bible, and it shouldn't. I mean, the word unicorn is a polytheist term. And so and we've been brainwashed to believe that the unicorn is this cuddly little cute, playful little horse with one horn, who was so playful they didn't hear the calling to go to the ark, which is why it didn't show up in the ark. Well, unicorn is the polytheist expression for an angelic being, typically the specific knowledge coming through that sort of third eye horn of the cherubim. And the unicorn was the on the coat of the arms of King James, with the Stuart dynasty, right? That's why it's there.
So
The Hebrew word is rem. It means a wild bull. It doesn't mean a cute, cuddly little horse. And in prehistory, in the physical realm, that unicorn was the horse giants rode into battle. So it was a giant chimera warrior horse for giants. I mean, it's not what we've been told. But that's the effect
so
of the preparation and the brainwashing. Sorry, I got onto a tangent there.
I love it. No, you get on to as many tangents as you like, because I think that's so real. And you know what? It's like so funny because, as you say, they mentioned the unicorn. It was like a little oops, right? In the
Yeah,
KG,
yeah,
in the
yeah.
King, it was like a little oops. See if they pick this up.
Yeah, and every
I
time
mean,
you
it's
see
so funny.
unicorn, it's related as what it is with like Ephraim and end time prophecy of a world empire, because King James thought of himself building a commonwealth in an antichrist type of limelight, or with Mount Hermon. Those are the two applications for unicorn. And the little horn,
Wow.
it shows up in Daniel 7 and 8 as the antichrist that grows up amongst the other 10 horns. You couldn't get more blatant in the imagery of using unicorn for a royale who is empire building.
Wow. 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 I mean, it's stuff like this where we really say, and it's like so obvious how they are hiding it in plain sight, right?
Yeah.
So everything is just happening in plain sight. They've been showing us all along. Wow, how
Yeah.
interesting. But
And they
anyway,
do a very
wow,
good
wow, wow,
job
wow.
of keeping us like mushrooms, right? And that's why we have to clear
Yes,
that haze. And we have to be contrarians, and we have to be contrarians even within our religion, because we have so much overlaid into our belief system that we can't no longer tell from what we're being taught what is truth and what isn't. And you have to verify everything because there is so much misdirection and deception.
absolutely. And discernment. And it's so true. I love, what you were saying, earlier on about understanding how prophecy truly works. You
Yeah,
know, it's not just something that someone sucks out of their thumb. There's a
yep,
really, I want to say, a biblical technique, and I mean like a holy technique. I'm
yeah,
talking about a holy technique to understanding how to read a true prophecy from
yeah,
God and from the God of light, not the dodgy God down there,
yeah.
the God down there.
If you want to figure out how the meek inherits the earth, you have to figure it out from a meek perspective. And
Yes,
that if God was going to provide us information, it should be understood from a meek perspective, not an elite
yes,
perspective, which is elite.
right.
These, I mean, you couldn't pick a more polytheist term to call themselves with the first two classes of the elites. I mean, El is the Hebrew word for an angel or a god, and they call them
Right.
Elites as because their bloodlines are now not as pure as what they originally were. They would have called themselves Elim in the first generations, but now they have the human bloodlines in there in order to survive. So that term, elite and nobility. Nobility is an Indo-Aryan language of the giants for the noble ones. They
Wow.
are, yeah. So we don't want to understand how the Bible should work through the elites. It makes no sense that we should follow the wisdom of the world. We should follow what the Bible
Yeah.
actually says. But they tell you you can't read the Bible unless you know how to interpret it. Why? Because the polytheists actually call the Bible a fairy tale. And that you
Wow.
get this interesting superficial story, but you have to be an adept to understand the allegories that are written in it to get at the truth, which is what we were talking about earlier with humorism. And this is that hermeneutics application as that intersection. Understand, hermeneutics is rooted in its etymology in the word Hermes out of the Greek pantheon.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so again, I
Right.
mean, they're
That's
telling
true.
us in plain sight what they're doing. And so when we look at um, the mythopoetic style that I said was similar, and we look at two individuals who wrote prolifically and terrific writers with Tolkien and Lewis that come out of the Rosicrucian Inkling Writing Society at Oxford. Um, you have this word that that they that they use in terms of how they deal with the hero that dies, and I'm trying to come up with it right now. But it starts with an E, and I'm just not able to get the word that they like to use. But it's to write a fairy tale ending for the actual tragic ending, so that the reader doesn't have to go through that personal um,
Wow.
sort of depression that
Wow.
they might see. If I think of the word before the end of the show, I'll come up with it. But there's a specific word that they use for that technique, and so they say Jesus dying on the cross is that literary term, that he actually died on the cross.
Right.
I'm sorry, that he didn't die on the cross. So
Didn't I was going to say didn't,
yep,
yeah.
yep, yep.
There- There's just there's one question here from one of the viewers earlier on, and I think I'm just going to pop it through to you. Can you ask Gary what the significance is with the stars, seven sisters, or I think she meant to say Pleiades,
Yep.
Pleiades? No, I think she meant to say Pleiades. So maybe I don't know, Gary, if it's not too long and involved, can you share with
Sure.
us what that's about?
Yeah, so that's a constellation of stars. In Greek mythology, they're called the Seven Sisters. And in the Greek and other flood stories around the world, three stars from the Pleiades come to the earth and crash into the earth. That starts the flood catastrophes. And so it's a significant sort of allegory. And even biblically, we're going to get descriptions of Pleiades as it's associated with Orion. And as you get into the passages, whether it's in Amos or the Psalms or the book of Job, you get descriptions of that can only be related to the flood um, catastrophe, like with the oceans being laid bare at that time. And they're associated with Orion and Pleiades, which I think is what the Bible is telling us, that the flood story is not just the flood, but there's a conflagration of events, which is what the book of Enoch says, which is what other accounts around the world says, that it's more than just a flood. But again, we're not led to look at these passages that are kind of like the parts of the Bible. And if you don't know what an oopart is, it's used in archaeology if they find like an elongated head and they put it aside. An oopart is an out of place um, um, archaeological find, and they call it ooparts. So, um, so yeah, it's an interesting term. And if you're reading flood stories and the Babel accounts, you're getting references to the Pleiades, including the temple that was built at the foot at several other accounts, like with the Popol Vuh and the Aztec accounts, or the Armenian accounts, or the Akkadian accounts, that this temple was dedicated to the Pleiades that created the flood.
Sorry, I had myself
That's
on
okay.
mute. Wow, so I actually didn't know that about the Pleiadians, that they were
Yep.
supposedly the creators of the flood.
Yep.
Hmm.
So we don't know what it is. I don't
Wow.
think it was the actual stars, but it could have been. Stars
Hmm.
are also an allegory for an angel. So it could have been
Right.
three
Yes.
angels that were sent to bring the destruction of the flood.
Right. 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 Wow. Very interesting. Gary, I think I will maybe round off with maybe just a final question.
Sure.
And I think if listeners would take, yeah, like one insight from
Oh,
your Genesis
just
6
just just
book.
just before you do it, so I don't forget it, that term is eucatastrophe that they use, Tolkien and Lewis do, for the
Catastrophe.
eucatastrophe, for the used for the hero of the fairy tale, so that the reader doesn't have to suffer through his tragedy.
Oh, wow.
You can Google it; it'll go right back to them. Let me tell you, you don't have to look hard. It's all hidden, and so that's when
Wow.
when the secret societies say, yeah, we use the Bible, but we look at it as a fairy tale. And then they use hermeneutics and humorism to glean what they want out for the history, for their own religious history.
Wow. It's double standards, hypocrisy. I don't quite know what to label that, but hey, I guess they do what
It's
they know.
shocking and astonishing as well. It's just, it gives you that cognizant dissonance when you start to awaken to how the world works.
Exactly, exactly. That's so true. That's so true. So I think what I wanted to ask you, maybe just in as a final question. Um, so if our viewers and our listeners could maybe take one insight from your Genesis 6 story about
Yeah.
healing the human condition, um, from your perspective, what would that be? What would you suggest for us?
Yeah. So when we look at the Genesis 6 conspiracy, there is this sort of understood thing that we take away from it, that you have this interrelationship between angels, humans, and the creation of the fallen ones that has affected us all the way through history and continues to affect us today and will play out in the end time. And it doesn't matter which belief system that you have in the world, but from a monotheist, that's going to happen. But from a monotheist system, here's what I would take away from why you want to understand this. It's our raison d'etre, our reason for being. And the Adamites were created as the resolution to the angelic rebellion. And that's why they hate us. And so we need to buy into why we're here. And what we're designed to do is through our free choices, this age is playing out. And free choice is given to all sentient beings. And our choice is to figure out who we are and what we need to do and what we want to do if we want to go on into eternity. And so there's a period of time where this plays out, and it goes back to something that's called in the Bible the book of life, that was created before creation, that has all the names in it that will be in this age. And that's the ordained period that has to play out. Everybody will have an opportunity to leave their names in the book of life or have it blotted out. That's why you need to understand why you believe what you believe and choose. And everything is counterfeited on the other side. Now, they would say the Bible counterfeits because it's, just they're the mirror image of, and the nemesis in their belief system. So either way, you have to choose. They will make you choose in the end, and God wants us to choose. He gives us that free choice. And so we need to understand why we're here and why things are playing out. And once you understand why we're here, now you can at least go forward. And my advice is to learn as much as you can and be comfortable with why you made your decision.
I love that. And I think that's so important. It really is. Be comfortable with why you made your decision. Because I think so many of us feel as if we've been forced into making decisions, or forced into being in a job, or forced into
Yeah.
whatever it might be. And that is so damaging for the human psyche and the human being. We have to be comfortable with the decisions we make. We have to love what we do and do what we love, because that's when we bring passion into the world. That's when our creative spirit is in its finest, is at its finest, is when we loving what we're creating and we creating what we love. We can't go wrong then. And yeah, I love what you said there. Be comfortable with why you're doing what you do. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Gary, is there where can our viewers find you? I know your stuff is your information is on the little
Yep.
banner. But
Mhm.
is there anything, anywhere that our viewers can still find you? And I don't know, do you want to maybe share some good news for our future we're doing, or maybe later? I don't know. You can say.
Sure. So the best way to find a little bit more about me or learn a little bit more about my books is to go to my website, the genesis6conspiracy.com, the number 6conspiracy.com. And if you want to support me, you buy a book. I don't take donations of any form. And you can get a signed copy from me from the website, or you can go to Amazon and purchase the books. There's links over to Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. There are also links over to the Audible versions and to the digital version. So that's the easiest way. And if you want to find out a little bit more about the books, I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book one on the website under the books page, and all 84 chapters of book two. And just the table of contents ought to get your interest up, or just reading a couple of the chapters. And it's just a small piece of the information that's in the book. I will be, I'm part of another project that as soon as I can get more information out that I'm permitted to release, I will. What I will say is there's a novel that I've been working on with the publisher who is writing the characters and had a idea of how he wanted to get to get people to better understand how AI works with the end time. And he wanted me to come in and be part of the project to provide background for the characters, for the organizations, and give it a Nephilim Genesis 6 conspiracy as to how prehistory is kind of connected with end time. And then I lay out, and we adhere to very strictly to my chronology of events for the end time. So it's called the Primo conspiracy. It'll be out early next year. And the subtitle, if it still sticks as we get through the editing process, is AI's Covenant with Babylon. And so it comes from that perspective of AI and how it might play in how the end time or the early end time might play out. It doesn't cover it all. Or if it goes over well, there'll be other books, but it's just to get some of these ideas a little bit more stream in a larger market than the nonfiction market that I tend to stay focused into. I will be putting out and producing with the company out of Nashville in November a 5-part curriculum on prophecy, where I'll walk through some of these terms like humanism and topology and lay down how I approach prophecy, putting everything around Jesus, and I'll actually get into showing how you put those pieces together on that. So that'll be a 5-part series that there'll be a charge for it, but if you want to get away from all of the standard interpretive approaches, this will hopefully resonate with people, because anytime I talk about it or show any of it, everybody's going, yeah, this makes way more sense.
Yeah. Wow. No, I'm sure that's incredible. I look forward to that for sure, Gary. And we having you back in November again for
Yeah.
another show. I can't remember the date offhand, but guys, watch the schedule. Gary will be back with us in November, and we are doing a book club with Gary. So watch the space. We haven't quite decided. Gary, maybe we should do your new book. Is it out next year?
It is, but I'm not permitted at this point to
Yeah, to do
read
it.
it, or yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
only
it's
for
it's
next
it's
year.
got to do with the copyrights. So
Yeah. Well, we're going to be doing a book club with Gary. We'll figure out which book we're going to be using and give you guys further details. So that's exciting. Yay, Gary. Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed, as always, having you as a guest on my show. Um, you are a wealth of information, and I really love the way you bridge the spiritual and the physical, I guess you can call it. I've been watching the comments, and it's really everyone is commenting on how clear and how succinct your explanations are. So thank
Oh,
you
well,
for
that's
that.
that's good to know because we're talking about some very complicated stuff at times, and without getting too long-winded, because you lose people, but you have to give enough sort of data points and still not make it complicated. So, and when we're talking physical and spiritual, those are big topics. So I'm glad the simplicity came across there because I'm very much a
Absolutely.
fan of the KISS method. Keep it as simple as possible, but give clear sort of
Exactly.
data points or images that people can sort of get their heads around it.
Exactly. And you definitely have a gift for that. So thank you so much. And I want to thank you so much to all our beautiful viewers for watching and joining as always. I really, really, really appreciate you in our chat family. And we've got some new members again. And I want to just say thank you for joining the membership. And we will see Gary next week. I mean, next month. Well, next week is next month, isn't it? I think.
It
Is it?
is,
Yes, I
yeah.
think so.
You're
I don't know
accurate.
what the date is, Gary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, guys. God bless. Gary, thank you again. And we will see you very, very soon. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.